Do you feel like you're losing yourself? Many professionals who are experiencing burnout typically say, I don't feel like myself anymore. And I've heard this time and again from those who come to work with me. They feel like they're starting to lose themselves or they're not sure if they can keep going. And the reason for this is because burnout doesn't only drain your energy, it drains your identity. The longer you're in a state of chronic stress, the longer you start to feel burnt out and question, how long can I keep doing this? You start to question, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? And that's because chronic stress, as it persists, it disconnects you from who you are and what you were created to do. And this experience, while it is very frustrating and it is difficult because people want to stay in the career they feel called to. But I want you to hear me in that this experience is a predictable pattern, but it is one that we can reverse and one that I have helped many clients in my coaching program reverse. And the reason for that is there is this cycle that we go through with our identity when our identity is being drained because of burnout. And that cycle happens because chronic stress narrows your attention. You see, the more you're trying to function in a state of chronic stress, your body thinks you're in survival mode. It does not know whether you're safe or not. And therefore, you don't know if you have the emotional capacity to keep handling everything that comes. When we're in survival mode, we are stepping out of our purpose-driven actions, meaning doing those things we know we're called to do, right? Survival mode isn't about fulfilling your purpose. Survival mode is about getting through the situation or the day. And that is what takes a toll on the identity because you know what your purpose is. But if you're functioning in survival mode, it's a constant questioning of, can I keep doing this? I don't know how to get out of survival mode. And we live in a society that encourages this constant drive, this constant pushing and going and going and going. And our bodies are not designed to do that 24/7, 7 days a week without breaks. And so you see, when your identity's starting to drain and you're in that constant survival mode, you're gonna start to lose interest in things you enjoy personally. So if you're somebody who enjoys hiking out in the mountains, or you enjoy golfing, or you enjoy time on the lake with family, that's not going to seem of interest to you. You're going to lose the desire to do those things because your body and your mind are saying, give me a break. I can't keep doing things, right? Creativity also declines when we are starting to lose our sense of identity or we're always in this fight or flight mode. Creativity can't happen because that part of the brain is not turned on. And generally speaking, joy fades. You see, I've had clients show up to work with me and they say, Deidre, I know this is what I'm supposed to do, but I don't know if I can keep going because they're starting to lose themselves in what the culture is they walked into or what the requirements are. And part of it comes from how tied to your purpose and your career is your identity, right? We often tie identity to our performance and outcomes and responsibilities, especially those who are high performers, right? You don't feel like you're succeeding unless you're doing more and you have a high output and you're performing and showing up and taking on all the responsibilities you're asked to. But your identity is more than just those day-to-day tasks you do to fulfill the job, right? So as a healthcare worker, and especially in the behavioral health, my purpose is to help people succeed in life, right? I want people to succeed and sustain in those careers they feel called to. But that means my identity can't be tied to how many people have I seen in a day or how many videos have I put out this week. Like, that's not where my identity is tied. It's rooted in where I believe my purpose is and the higher power I believe in, but it's tied to am I helping people sustain? Right? And that can come in many forms of how to accomplish that. But I can't run myself into the ground and how an organization expects me to run and function can't be tied to my identity and it can't keep me in a state of chronic stress because I will burn out. And so, how exactly does burnout continue to disconnect you from yourself, right? Because again, if you're in that state of chronic stress for too long and you start to get emotionally exhausted, right? The more exhausted you are, the more you disengage from meaningful activities. And burnout, let's define that real quick, right? World Health Organization defines it as exhaustion and emotional depletion and being disconnected from your work. It's about that internal shift that happens. And so if you're starting to lose interest in things you normally enjoy, or you stop doing those daily things that keep you grounded, you're probably hitting a state of burnout and you're probably starting to not feel like yourself, right? And that's where burnout is disconnecting you from you. And we want to see you stay connected. If you're starting to feel that cognitive overload, so mentally, you've hit your limit and you don't know how much more you can take on. And maybe your ability to reflect and have that self-awareness is gone. And I see this a lot with clients I work with. And that's also where you're disconnected from what's going on in your body, right? You're so externally focused out in front of you that you don't recognize your body and your mind are screaming at you saying, "Give us a break. We got to calm down. We can't keep going this far." But when we're externally focused, that's because we're so focused on those outcomes and producing what we need to produce that we are getting disconnected from ourselves. And so this is where burnout starts to dominate your identity. And we don't want to do that, right? I want to see you stay connected to your identity, but the more you're burnt out, the more you lose yourself. And you start to wonder, who am I? What am I doing? And your personal values and your interests become secondary. But yet, what I have seen time after time with clients is when we get reconnected to ourselves, we stay connected to our bodies. They have that self-awareness and they can reflect and recognize what's going on internally. And they stay connected to their values and what's important, and the values drive your decisions in life. Then you're going to start to overcome burnout, right? You can feel like you can reclaim that authority and authenticity of yourself. And burnout is no longer the primary driving force. So your values and your interests come back. They quit being secondary. And so, what are those signs that you're in this identity drain cycle? So, first and foremost, are you feeling detached from the work you once cared about? So if you're a healthcare worker and you know that you're supposed to be helping care for people and helping people heal their bodies or their minds, you might be in the behavioral health field, and you're starting to not look forward to going to work. You're feeling that detachment. And I know in the behavioral health field specifically, and I think all healthcare, there's a lot of aspects of the work that feels very thankless. And that can impact how well you start to feel detached from your work, right? Some people start to lose their motivation and enthusiasm. And this is where I've seen people who are so excited about stepping into the work. They know that's what they're supposed to do. They love helping people and they thrive in it. All of a sudden they have this no expression on their face. They've completely gone flat and numb and they're just going through the motions because they don't know how to get out of the emotions, how to get out of that cycle. If you're in this identity drain cycle, you might also be feeling emotionally numb, right? So that's where this indifference that I was starting to talk about there comes into play because You just go through the motions. It doesn't really matter. Those are the thoughts I hear. It doesn't matter. I'm just doing it now because I need a paycheck and I spent all the money on the education and I don't know what else to do or how to get out of this. The other sign is difficulty recognizing your own goals and interests. So there's a detachment from the goals you used to have. It might be life goals, things you want to accomplish in your personal life or with your family. And that could also be professional goals. These all go out the window because we just feel like we have to get through each moment. But you don't have to, right? And so, as we're talking about signs that there's this identity drain, let's also talk about how do leaders and organizations contribute to that? Because it's not just a personal internal detachment that we have going on. There are these external factors that play into that. And the first and foremost is that culture in a company or organization that tends to reward constant availability is going to contribute to the identity drain, right? And so, for example, when I was working as a manager, program director in a community agency, and there's this expectation, or I get a phone call at 8, 9 o'clock at night, hey, are you available for a staffing case? And if I say sure, right, that feeds into this constant availability versus, wait a minute, I should respect that Deidre has a personal life. And so the cultures, the work cultures that reward that constant availability are going to impact that identity drain that you feel as a professional. Cultures need to support the professional as a person, as a human doing the job, who also needs time away from work, right? Leaders who don't show and don't model recovery time and don't model boundaries, they're going to also show you that work is all that's important and that will lead to identity drain. And so if they're not supporting that recovery time, right, in between demands, the constant demand that goes on for 3 months, 6 months, even a year, and there's no recovery time, identity drain is going to happen. Leaders who have expectations that are 100% tied to output also impact the identity drain, right? Yes, output is important, but all expectations should not be tied to output because that again goes back to performance and that's all that is important and that's who you are. You are the person who accomplishes X, Y, and Z. But that's not the case and that's not true, right? You have to, as a leader, have expectations that the person is also taking care of themselves. Output, yes. Humanness of the job, also important. And the other piece that often happens, whether it comes from leaders or just the organization as a whole, is it causes this internal pressure among employees to constantly perform, right? And that's where you feel like you have to always be on. You always have to be doing. You always have to be performing and completing. And that internal pressure is going to erode your identity. And so at this point, you might be asking, okay, so a lot of this resonates, but now what? And that's a great question. And that's why I created the burnout assessment because it's designed to help you recognize what stage of burnout are you in, right? Identity drain starts in the early signs of burnout, but it really implodes within ourselves when we hit severe stage. And so I just invite you to take the burnout assessment. It is linked below. It's just to help you get an idea of where you're at, maybe offering some resources that can help you start to take steps so that you don't hit the severe level. But I also want you to hear me that if you are in severe burnout, you can recover. It is possible. I've done it myself and I've walked hundreds of clients through that. And so start with the burnout assessment so you can understand your burnout patterns because feeling disconnected from yourself is not a personal failure. It's just a sign that chronic stress and possibly burnout has taken hold, and there's some things that need to shift.